Also, the generally accepted international rules of asylum seeking is you seek asylum in the nearest country available to you, not America. Just because every asylum seeker out there who might be persecuted doesn't get to come to the country of their preference. They get to go seek asylum in the nearest country that is safe for them. That all goes out the window, and it's a completely reckless, irresponsible administration of the border by Joe Biden, and he keeps on not fixing it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Off Limits. This is a groundbreaking podcast because, Matt, as you know, the conversations we have are usually off limits.
Yeah, no, we're breaking ground.
We're breaking ground right now.
Literally, figuratively, and everything in between.
Yeah, they're about to learn a whole bunch.
No doubt.
You know what I'm saying? It's a funny thing about this. Matt Bilinsky here, but sometimes you wonder, it's like, what can we touch on that hasn't been said 15,000 times?
True.
I always worry that I'm going to repeat myself, which is why I try to stay closer to broader ideas, right? So we can get into like these issues and these political issues, which mean a lot, but sometimes I just don't want to repeat myself. You ever find, how do you avoid that?
All the time. And you think about it, and particularly because I put out a lot of content, mostly on social media, that's like 8 to 12 stories a day about something going on in the world. And you do wonder about going over already traveled ground. But here's the thing. I mean, that people like us who create content, who have these conversations, don't really, we're not as conscious of, is the people that are just consumers of content.
Yeah.
They're not thinking about it as much as we are, right?
Yeah, that's
so something that you think they're going to be like, oh my God, Brian's at it again, Matt's at it again. No, they're looking for the fresh content and the fresh takes again, and something that might even be tangential or just cover, a little crossover with something you've already said. They've, 9 times out of 10, they're going to find value in it.
My thing is that a lot of bad ideas that have been tried historically seem to get repackaged and tried again. So that's, to me, it's like it's so much less about the person. The conversation of fucking, is Putin a bad guy? Putin is a product of a system that created Putin.
Sure,
you can't survive in Russian politics without being Putin, or much worse.
Absolutely.
And in fact, if you compare him to all the other Russian leaders, at least he's not up to his elbows in blood of his own people. Although you could make the argument with Ukraine, but the
maybe
point
not
is,
to his elbows, but some part of his body.
You're not gonna avoid that and so would Bill Clinton or Donald Trump or anybody else or me be the same way in that system, having come up that way? I don't know. Maybe, because it's the only way you would stay alive. So for me, it's like, well, we got to you have to have a system in place that doesn't allow for one person to wield that kind of power. That's the conversation.
Well, when you look at it from a historical perspective, and Americans have this very myopic perspective where we always see it through our framework and our narrative that we were ruled by tyrants who happened to be across the ocean. We defeated them against the odds and we installed democracy, and everything's been great since. Not all other countries have that history, okay? The only 9 years that Russia experienced democracy in its history did not go very well, right? So as you mentioned, it's like, what are the other comparatives? What are the other options? If you're looking at the American system right now, even with a mental invalid as our president and a lot of corruption and bad stuff going on in our government, if you're looking at, would you rather be ruled by Putin-like, semi-tyranny in Russia or the American system, you choose the American system 10 times out of 10. If you look at, would you rather be under the rule of Vladimir Putin 2024 or frolic, just absolute chaos and corruption of Russian oligarchs financed by unscrupulous American financiers, taking $4 billion mineral mines and essentially selling them to each other for $150 million.
You're talking about the 90s.
The 90s in Russia, where the
Wild East.
Exactly. The life expectancy of a Russian male from 1991 to 2001 went down like 11 years, right? So if you're comparing, hey, do we like this Putin situation better than we like that? That's a different perspective than, do we like being ruled by Putin and the limitations that come with that, or Joe Biden's America, or Barack Obama's America, or even Donald Trump's America. So that's how you have to think about it. Very few people are capable of doing so.
That's very true. I always would fall. I realized I was such a product of American mythology because I always broke the world, probably up until about 15 minutes ago. I broke the world into good guys and bad guys. Mm-hmm. And America was always on the side of the good, and anybody else is on. There's this. That is the, I guess, liability of being a patriot, the liability of being, somebody who who believes in the Constitution and the Founding Fathers, which I do. I hold certain things sacred when it comes to the
because
American
there's a lot
experiment.
of stuff we could get very easy to take for granted, and I think a lot of people out here do. And that's why, if you are truly appreciative of the opportunities and the lifestyle that this country has afforded, you should be some degree of a patriot. But
you should be reverent of how difficult it was to solve those problems, to put into place a system, the mechanics, the technology that kept power out of one group's hands. That is the great genius of people like Madison and Alexander Hamilton was that they figured that out. Just the supply chain that gets food on my table, the fact that I have heaps of ripe fruits and vegetables in the wintertime, and my children don't suffer from vitamin deficiency. Don't take that for granted. That had to be figured out.
How about air conditioning? People, until about 85 years ago, if you were hot, you were just fucking hot.
I got one better for you.
Yeah.
How about anesthesia?
Yeah.
How about antibiotics?
Completely.
Things like that.
And then people sit here and try to modern day, very one of the cute little habits of modern age is to go look back and criticize the founding fathers for their supposed moral failings. Like you realize that was like 150 years before toothpaste was invented, right? And so when you're comparing, were they better men than the people that surrounded them, the other comparables, the other comps from the late 18th century? Strong argument that they were, right? This whole idea that you get to vote for your government, that, even if there are some people with some moral failings at the top and power corrupts no matter what, that these are better people than happen to be at the top of the hierarchy in pretty much every other functioning society in 1776. Pretty strong argument. The answer is yes.
100%. And also, at least they were glaringly aware of the contradiction, that peculiar institution called slavery. That was a huge issue for all of them. Yep. They talked about the fact that when you say all men are created equal, we know that this is a glaring contradiction. You can't be around people in bondage, African people of African descent in bondage, and not very quickly realize, oh, fuck, they love their kids just as much as I love my kids. They bleed the way I do. They scream the way I do. They laugh at the same things. You just can't.
Just basic humanity.
Yeah, I mean, George Washington wrote about that at the end. He freed his slaves and said, I don't know where to send them because the world's a dangerous place. So,
and also people, the historical, misremembering of what other societies had slavery at the time and who ended slavery. A lot of people who like to hate on the British Empire, oh wait, that happens to be the same group of people who pretty much went around the world ending slavery in dozens upon dozens of societies.
That's right. Thomas Sowell has written a lot about that. That's exactly right. So yeah, those are the kinds of things that I think are. That's where I get into sort of like, it's worth reminding people.
Yep.
It's worth reminding people of how we got here. And that's what I kind of I bristle at.
And it's just when you say, until 15 minutes ago, I'd be interested to hear. And in terms of some of your shifting views on not whether or not the United States is the good guy, but to the extent that you're willing to or can be conscious of its flaws, what was your evolution there and when?
Well, you start to realize that there are losers in history and there are winners in history. And I've always had the luxury, even though I grew up all over the world, I've had the luxury of being on the winning side of history. And so, and just if you were to look at the Asian mindset, let's just take the Chinese mindset. It's a very different mindset. It's a very different kind of idea that I came from somewhere else. You came out of this world and me as an individual. So the idea is you're raised to say that you as an individual can change the world, and you as an individual you're the oak tree, and everything else is a leaf. Well, when you're Chinese, you're a leaf, and you're not the oak tree. But maybe more importantly is, I guess, when I look at our involvement in Afghanistan and Iraq and around the world.
That was it with me too.
Right? And I start to go, man, I kind of supported this in good faith.
Yeah.
In a way. I sort of said that Saddam Hussein.
How old were you at the time?
I was old enough to know better. It was started in 91, but I was old enough to know better.
Well, in the one in 2003, Ray Charles could have seen that one coming. It was
and I didn't.
Yeah.
I would say this. I would say this. I was naive enough to think that, I couldn't see that the people, I had too much reverence because they were older than I was and they seemed very smart.
Yeah.
I had too much reverence for the architects of said wars because I thought to myself, I heard an argument that I thought made sense, which was, and I think it was Henry Kissinger, who said, sovereignty is not an argument anymore because technology is making it so that a mushroom cloud over an American or European city is very possible. And there are people out there that want to do that. And 9/11 terrified me. It scared me shitless.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, if you've got the fourth largest army in the world, Iraq, and they have the kinds of resources, money, and even technology. They have used weapons of mass destruction on the Kurds. So the will is there, the technology is there. You're telling me there are weapons of mass destruction. I know there's will there. I kind of bought into all of it because I thought, why would you lie about this? We're trying to make the world safer. We got this dictator who's not accountable to anybody. I bought into all the stories, which might be true, but he had started 2 wars with Iran. He invaded Kuwait, and I thought this guy would very, very happily drop a weapon of mass destruction accidentally on purpose into the hands of an Al-Qaeda or whatever. Those were viable arguments in some ways in terms of we're an intelligence apparatus. We have to make sure 100,000 people. 9/11 could have looked like a fender bender. There were people who had the motivation to do really bad things.
Sure.
So I kind of bought into that, and I thought that made sense. But I was very naive the problem is when you go into another country and decide you're going to exercise regime change.
Yep.
The hubris of thinking you, as a person who's never been to Iraq, doesn't speak the language, don't know the history, that you somehow could restructure that country. Babylon.
Yeah.
It's had a historical footprint of 5,000 years. You fucking idiot.
Yeah.
And again, I'm a dummy because it takes somebody shaking me awake after 10 years. 20 years to go, fuck, yeah.
Yeah, better late than never, although, to give you a little shit for this, the baseline of historical knowledge about that region would have been the tell that they were going to fuck this up 6 ways to Sunday right off the bat.
And I knew that, though. The problem is I have no excuse because I knew that. I wasn't.
If you knew that Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden were religious lunatics and their enemies were secular dictators like Saddam Hussein, and you've got these idiots out there saying, wait, these two are actually in cahoots together. Like, oh, okay, they're totally bullshitting us.
Yes. Well, that I never quite bought into. I knew that was probably bullshit.
Sure, but when they were going that hard on that, and two, once they started to pound, it's the way they use the lingo, and I think it's something that you probably now realize. Once you see them try to go so repetitive and redundant on these buzzwords, that's the tell that they're fucking with people, right?
That's
it seems like Kyle Rittenhouse crosses state lines. Like, who gives a fuck? That has no bearing on the analysis of this topic whatsoever. Weapons of mass destruction. Everyone, there was no change in whatever Saddam Hussein had from 1994 to 1998 to 2001, September 2001 to December 2001, right? Yeah. So like the idea, whatever weapons he had, George Bush before 9/11 seemed to believe that it was not a big deal that he had these weapons. And all of a sudden now him having these weapons justify arguably the first, initiation offensive war in America's history. It doesn't check out.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you're 100% right. And I had heard those arguments, and I somehow I had bias. I had patriotic bias. And you know what? You know what's really embarrassing? I might have been subconsciously defending my father and men like my father.
Was he a veteran?
Yes, but more importantly, he was an American who believed in good guys and bad guys, and an intellectual, thoughtful guy, very smart, very fair, and but was a product of the Cold War, and probably just as afraid of what I think World War II, even though he was 10 or something when it was over, or whatever. That was a memory for everyone of that age, and
defining
and realizing how horrific the world could be. And he was a student of World War II, a student of Nazi Germany. In fact, my area of focus, I was a history major. My area of focus was Nazi Germany because my father said to me, I never forgot it. I said, this guy was this guy who accepted an Academy Award, and he said, he said something like, he started mentioning the Holocaust, and I knew he was Jewish. I was young. And I said, why do these Jewish people always talk about the Holocaust? And my father looked at me and said, 6 million people? 6 million people killed? And then another time I said, the Holocaust was bad, but, and he goes, oh, stop. Do yourself a favor. Never say the Holocaust was bad and then follow with but. We're not Jewish. And I never forgot that. I never forgot the how he was very good at telling me that there are certain things that must stand out, that you must understand the meaningful difference between things, that you have to have a hierarchy of care and value. Mm-hmm. Values are the ability to define for yourself and really objectively define the difference between what's really bad, what's really good, what's good, what's bad.
Yes.
This is very important. It's not to be a relativist. Mm-hmm. He said, I remember another time, he said, never be an intellectual. There's always an answer.
Yeah.
It may be a trade-off, but
that idea is so stupid, only an intellectual could talk themselves into it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of things that I think I fell into those traps, though. Mm-hmm. I fell into those traps.
So what do you think, do you see what parallels between that era and the false narratives being peddled and how they're being, what do you see in parallel right now?
The worry I have now is, I just don't know who's in charge. I think the intelligence apparatus, and you can call it the deep state, doesn't seem to be accountable to anybody.
But that's another thing that I don't think is necessarily that new.
Okay.
Right? Go look, man. Go back. I was in Dallas, so I did a little, JFK deep dive and did the whole thing. I was like, the intelligence apparatus was even more prominent, even more powerful, and because it was still they had been mandated that power because it was right after World War II, and we were in the midst of the Cold War. So it was like, okay, we create all these agencies out of World War II, also in order to fight this existential battle that we were actually in the middle of. That actually was a battle with true stakes about like, this is the way we see the world and you see the world differently, and one of these two systems is going to win out. So that deep state was not, was even more powerful and more rogue at the time. And and this is something just generally, but while you can find sinister motives and actors and corruption through a lot of different systems, you still don't want to overestimate the capabilities of your enemy or who these people are, right? So it was released this week, right? Or at least expanded on. Anyone who's been paying attention saw this, but Mike Schellenberger, who's done fantastic work on all this stuff and on deep state security apparatus corruption and free speech and whatnot, and seeing that John Brennan, the former head of the CIA, essentially fabricated a bunch of stories around Russia and their involvement in the 2016 election. You ever hear John Brennan speak? He ain't impressive.
No.
This guy's no genius.
Right.
The people in these
bureaucrats.
Yes. The people in these organizations are not superhuman geniuses, and to the extent that their analogs in 1967 were pretty smart and sharp, they're way less sharp now. And like the 51 members of the security apparatus that signed the letter attesting that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation, literally based on no objective evidence whatsoever, and in fact, all the evidence pointed in the opposite direction. It didn't take geniuses to do that, right? So while you should be concerned and skeptical of the corrupt forces, you also, and this is what a lot of my followers who agree with me on 8 out of 10 things, but disagree with me on 2, a little bit of where some of my disagreements with them stem from is like, stop overestimating your enemy.
I couldn't agree with you more. I could not agree with you more. I don't think that a bloated bureaucracy like the CIA, et cetera, is as powerful as people think. I don't think there is. There's this idea that everything stems from somewhere deep down in the bowels of Langley or in DARPA, and that they're incredibly organized and they control the weather. And it's just, I'm sorry, I know a lot of them.
Yeah. And did you say, did you read this J.D. Vance? What he wrote about why he thinks Biden's going to be the Democratic nominee?
No.
I think you summed it up perfectly. He said, and J.D. is one of the people who is more skeptical, of the deep state, of these powerful forces. It says, will Biden be replaced on the ballot? Question is a good proxy for our belief about elites. If you think the elites are mostly midwits who are motivated by status anxiety, the Dems are probably stuck with Biden. If you think our elites are super evil super geniuses, maybe the Dems can replace Biden with Michelle Obama or Gavin Newsom. Then he goes, I know a lot of these people. My vote is for the midwits. It's Trump Biden 2024.
Yeah.
That's it. He's like, these people are not that impressive.
No, they're like us. They're like anybody else.
But like dumber than us.
Yeah, maybe. Or they're just people who are in the room trying to figure things out. My buddy is a guy who's around a lot. He's an intelligence guy or whatever. I don't know what he is, but he's very smart. I've known him for a long time, since I was 18. He's one of the smartest people I know. And he was telling me about Blinken and those guys. And he goes, they're fucking smart. They're really smart. And they're very aware of all the arguments. It's the problem is that when you take bold action, you might be very boldly wrong. And there are so many moving parts that it's really hard to do anything.
Yes.
Just getting, when you get Ukraine aid, the amount of Ukraine aid that gets to the airport in wherever it might be, Kyiv or whatever, now getting that aid to the front lines, past all the people who have power on the ground there, the corrupt mob guys or whatever you want to call them, who put that shit in the warehouses. Everybody gets their cut so that they can sell it later on at a premium, or they can use it to get political favor. So they go, Zelensky, we're giving this. Well, I got this stuff. I'm giving it over here, just so you know. I'm only the troops that support you vocally, just so you know. I got you. You know, whatever it is. About 10% or 5% actually gets. We have our guys on the ground who drive those trucks. They have their guys on the ground waiting with their trucks. You understand?
Yeah.
So much of this is so messy, and so there's so many moving parts. So good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck getting involved in another country. You just understand you're going to be dealing with things you never saw coming.
And just, oh God, what they're trying to do again, trying to insulting our intelligence, telling us that this is the ultimate showdown between good and evil, and if we don't defeat Russia, Putin's going to go and retake Eastern Europe. What type of idiots believe this?
Yeah, that's right.
Who and like how they believe we're that dumb, but they seem to believe they can get away with it, and to a certain extent they have been able to somewhat, but it still sometimes boggles the mind.
Yeah. Well, I love always bringing it back to fighting. Like when you're talking to a real fighter, like an MMA guy. I remember I used to do Taekwondo, and I was showing, I think it was Nate Marquardt, who's a phenomenal fighter. And I was showing him a back kick, or I was showing him something, and I was saying something about roundhouse kick and stuff. And he kind of was right. He was being nice to me, but he goes, I don't really like to turn my back in a fight. And I was like, oh, I remember marking that. And then I was at American Top Team, and I tried to roundhouse kick a guy, and he checked it, and I kicked it with my front foot, the top of my foot. Didn't go well for me. That's why they kick with their shins, and So there are certain things like, so when I would see things, I would see a fighter come on and he was really flashy. I remember, Yair Rodriguez, flashy, amazing athlete, amazing fighter, jumping and kicking and wheel kicking and all that. And my buddy, a couple fighters, one of them, Brendan Schaub, they go, doesn't work with the higher up guys. He's really exciting, but they can't move him up too quickly. I go, well, doesn't work. I mean, he's impossible to defend. And he goes, no, it just doesn't. I go, why not? He goes, I don't know, it just doesn't. It's not going to work against a boxer / wrestler who can stop you. So all these things that you see a guy kicking really hard and it just sounds like a gunshot when he hits the pads. That's if the guy in front of him is standing still. Yeah, he can kick through a baseball bat. That's not how real fights are.
Yeah.
Real fights are, the guy's never in front of you. He's always hitting you back. He's always got you off balance. There are 1,000 things that go wrong in a fight. So you can practice all these things in theory, and then when you put it in practice, and of course war, you can multiply that by a factor of 1,000. So that's again, maybe sometimes understanding that the best way, you will be lucky if you get a controlled chaos, if you get a controlled anarchy. It's kind of the way our system of government works, which is good. There's a controlled anarchy to it.
Yeah, certainly.
It just sort of creeps along, and there are problems in one step forward, 2 steps back, whatever it is. That's better than having a bunch of philosopher kings who can plan things out with great efficiency on a board and then execute those things.
Well, you're seeing that, right? Okay, you want to talk about battles between visions of the world, right? We won the battle with true communism in the 20th century, and now we've got the social digital media version of that, where the Chinese system, the results of the Chinese system are being placed up against the results of our system, and it's a tougher battle right now because the digital age is not the chaos that you're talking about. the digital age that increases scale, velocity, and divisiveness has been more difficult for a more free-flowing state and system like the American system. And when you've got all this chaos and then you multiply that chaos by 15 because of the digital world and the information flow and you can't control it, then some people are saying, oh, well, look at how quickly the Chinese get stuff done. Look at their economic system. It's like if you take communist central planning, but with profit motive and business oriented in an era where other countries and other societies have to deal with the divisiveness of the digital world, all of a sudden the Chinese system starts looking a lot more appealing. And that was a conversation that was having. And one of the things I did like about Trump is that he brought that in his crass, less articulate manner, brought that conversation to the forefront because like, wait a second, we've got a pretty powerful country that's fighting a one-way war against us. We need to fight this war in the opposite direction. That hasn't been as prominent a conversation during the Biden administration, which has been interesting. But, you have to think about whether or not the Chinese system is a more proper system for the digital era, and particularly because look at how people are losing control right now in America, and everyone is so discombobulated and dysregulated. However, then at the end of the day, you think, listen, look at how they have to live their lives. It is not a system that enhances human flourishing at a human to human level.
Yeah, not innovation necessarily, right? You've got to be able to give your leaders the finger. I mean, to an extent, you got to. I think that the only issue with the Chinese, you've got Xi seems to have taken over everything, and top-down control requires obedience.
Sure.
And I think that to create that innovative entrepreneurial spirit on the level that exists in the United States, you've got to have permission to kill your teacher. Mm-hmm. You've got to have permission to tell your rulers to go fuck themselves because this is a better way to do it. Mm-hmm. That mindset has to be sure.
Yeah. Eventually, the ill effects of not having that are gonna manifest themselves, right?
But I think your point is. I know exactly what you're saying. That is the rub.
It was interesting. Someone said what World War II was to Europe, social media is to the United States. It's like this system is just tough. It was tough enough to manage with the divisiveness and the cleavages that we had before the internet. Now with everybody in their niche information silos getting their own information, very hard to manage. And we've seen it. I don't know. I'm not predicting impending collapse of some sort, but it's going to be. We've got challenges ahead of us.
Well, what do you worry about the most?
I'm worried about
that.
No, the basic stuff that you see that we're now about 10 years into a low grade cultural revolution where the opposite, the antithesis of the values that you described a few moments ago have really taken hold. And do you
think they're winning?
They've definitely been winning, and I predicted they would win. So right around 2014, 15, I started to notice some of this stuff, and I started to get,
That was, by the way, when everybody started getting social media.
Just before, yeah. So it's interesting to track, right? Because you look at the timeline. Don't forget MySpace. A lot of people were on MySpace. MySpace, 2004 to 2008. Facebook starts coming around. Facebook and Twitter, 2008, 2009. Twitter starts getting a little more traction, 2010, 11. Instagram's only 2012.
Yep.
Instagram, when it actually started getting traction. So this whole universe that we are in right now with images colliding at people's faces nonstop, pictures and videos on your phone, really barely over a decade, right?
That's right.
But things started to take a real interesting turn. I don't know if you've heard the term the Great Awakening that Matt Bilinsky coined and whatnot. But I started, and I was a fairly liberal guy. I was a pretty consistent, not too liberal Democrat voter. I didn't like what Bush did in Iraq, and it turned me in an opposite direction. I was not a progressive type, but I voted Democrat. And then wait a second. I'm starting to see some real crazy gender and racial pathology here. I'm starting to see some ideas about criminal justice and public safety that just ignore the last 30 years where we tanked the murder rate in America's big cities by 70%. Were you just asleep while that happened? Maybe you don't throw away the policies that catalyze that. And I started to notice this stuff, and I'm like, this, and then a bunch of people told me, because remember in the early 90s, there was a weird period of political correctness, right?
Yeah.
And it dissolved.
Yes.
It self-corrected.
Yeah.
Everyone goes, the pendulum will always swing
they
back.
They made fun of it, yeah.
Yeah, the pendulum swings back. And when I started vocalizing my concerns about this, people said, don't worry. It's the same thing as the early 90s. The pendulum will swing back. And I said, I got to be honest, I'm going with my gut on this. If ideas this stupid gain purchase in sense-making institutions, we're in trouble.
And they have.
Unfortunately, I was right. Unfortunately,
I think you're right. That's exactly right. The only saving grace I feel is that, first of all, there is pushback and it's galvanized.
Now there is.
Yes.
The last, and in particular, it's strange and not to be too Jewish-centric, but it is interesting, because when the stakes are higher, sometimes that's the disinfectant, right? And this war, the Hamas's attack against Israel and this war in the Middle East has been a revealing incident to a lot of people who were going along with this stuff that either said, one, knew it was bad and just went along, or two, didn't realize it's happening. And whether you see the battles over DEI in Ivy League universities, understanding this, the little guy is the good guy no matter what mindset towards a lot of these things.
But it wasn't just that.
No, it wasn't just, no.
In other words, to piggyback on what you're saying, what I actually started to see as I started looking at this is it's one thing to say, hey, we need to make some changes. Our system isn't perfect, and black people have been marginalized and things like that. And you can have these conversations, and we haven't faced up to what slavery really did and the ramifications and all that. But sorry, what I started to notice was that behind DEI, behind critical race theory, behind what woke really started to represent was, oh, no, we're not interested in working with you. We're interested in tearing it all down.
Yes.
We are interested in destruction.
We want a new operating system.
This is a real revolution where we want to literally tear down everything you hold sacred, including the Constitution, because it's trash. And we want to resurrect our vision of the world, which is essentially a Marxist vision of the world. The nuclear family this is a village. We're a commune. There are no families. It becomes and then that was the first thing. And the second thing is I realized, number one, that's been tried before. It was a disaster, resulted in too many murders if you're anti-murder.
Yeah, to enforce egalitarianism, you got to crack a few eggs. And that means sometimes Joseph Stalin decides to starve 10 million peasants in the Ukraine because they didn't get on board. Exactly. Yeah. And the other thing is that, you can't apply these rules that are ever changing at the level of detail. I don't know what to do with you if you tell me that my gender, I'm a man or a woman based on an inner feeling that's always changing. We know that. It's so easy to make fun of. So more and more of these people just are narcissists and crazies. Yeah, well, also, why do we have the Enlightenment? The whole point of the Enlightenment was to ground humanity in empiricism and objectivity, and that what the subjective mental impression that you have does not negate objective reality, that there are universal truths. All of a sudden, literally the thing that is the foundation of who we are as human beings, that becomes a function of what your mind tells you and gender self-identification. Do we just throw the Enlightenment out? What is this? And Douglas Murray.
You can throw biology and all of that.
Yeah, are you a fan of Douglas Murray?
Yeah, I love him.
Yeah, he's great, right? He said, and he made an interesting point. He's like, they push so hard on the gender thing because if they can convince you, if they can get you to bend the knee on something that crazy, they can get you to bend the knee on anything.
That's exactly right. So are we winning? Is this galvanized pushback?
It's making progress.
It is?
Okay, my assessment of this, I told people this was going to go a bad direction, 2014 to 17. Most people said, well, stop, why are you wasting your time on this? 2017 to 20, some people start waking up, but the train's off the tracks. 2020, 2021, oh my God, kerosene meet the match, right? Now, there are some... now you've got the counter-revolution. That was this cultural revolution, and you can make the analogies between Mao's cultural revolution in China, and we can have that discussion. There's another 2 hours. Now you're getting the counter-revolution a bit. Elon buying Twitter, not an insignificant battle in this one.
Not at all.
Massive battle. The exposure of DEI in universities and some of what the work that Chris Rufo is doing in getting in exposing how these corporations and the DEI system is just blatant racism and is just a terrible way of viewing the world, that we're putting people's demographic characteristics at the forefront of their consciousness. Now, who wants to live like that?
Yep.
There's some progress that is being made. However, it's the war is not even close to being won. Mm-mm. Not close. Do you know Toronto? Oh my God! This morning, I know it's Canada, but it's pretty much not much of a deviation. If you saw the statement, the Toronto School Board, this is not a little city outside Toronto. The Toronto School Board put out a statement about their values. what they said about recognizing like the supposed historical education system as like a manifestation of whiteness and the dominant power structure, I mean, your head would explode. Do you know how deeply this stuff is embedded in the education system? Number one. And two, in corporate, it's quicker to turn around in corporate America because of business.
Well, profits.
Well, okay, but there's also an interesting piece of this, right? Because a lot of the people who falsely thought the pendulum would swing back figured that there was a business motive that was going to dominate the cultural motives. And that doesn't always ring true. Or if it rings true, it always rings true on a different timeline. People say, go woke, go broke. Okay, on what timeline? You can go be woke and do destructive stuff and just jam this into your culture for 6-8 years before you realize, oh shit, we're destroying our businesses here. And a lot of Hollywood has done that. Or ESPN figured that out after the damage was already done.
Yeah.
Bud Light figured that out after the damage was already done. So a lot of these companies that you assumed would realize this was hurting their bottom line, no, because the same thing as with the security apparatus. They weren't thinking about how to deliver weapons to the Ukraine. People weren't thinking about how these companies operate internally. There was a New York Times piece, you should read it. It says the bosses, the 37-year-old bosses and the 27-year-old employees they're scared of. Yeah. Okay, that there arose kind of something in corporate culture where bosses were concerned about offending the sensibilities of younger, woker employees who were then going to go create some sort of campaign against them.
Or they just go rogue.
Yeah. And you saw, my friend Ethan Strauss did amazing work on this in terms of Nike. He was a guy, this is a Bay Area liberal, this guy, was writing for ESPN, and he starts looking around like 2015, 16, he's like, what the hell is going on here? It's like, I'm happy to be somewhat supportive of what Colin Kaepernick is doing, but I'm pretty much being told internally that I have to worship the ground that this guy walks on, and that every decision that's being made at the corporate level is about me saying, yes, it's great that I'm a white man who's not getting promoted or a raise and everybody else is, and I'm not into it. And then he went to The Athletic, same thing happened. And literally, the Athletic took the same progressive turn as ESPN. And then he said, you know something? Fuck it. I'm going to Substack and I'm writing about all this stuff where the kind of strange collision of progressive politics infesting the sports and the sports media world. And he's doing better than ever. And he's wrote some incredible pieces on how he's like, at these companies, there were mid-level employees at Nike that were bigger fans of Colin Kaepernick. And hey, if one of their bosses said, well, I don't know, we're offending a lot of our potential customers right now by some of the stuff we're doing, they were going to hear it from their underlings, and they didn't want that to happen, so they kept on going with it.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's the problem. Even at X and stuff like that, and certainly Facebook and stuff, there are just these mid-level sort of like people who just decide, fuck them.
Yeah, and then you see everyone saw Netflix with Chappelle. Ted Sarando said, okay, guys, sorry, you can go have your little protest. We're putting out Chappelle. So you see some of the pushback here and there, and the pushback is now getting stronger. However, the just because you're seeing a Bill Ackman just incinerate the Ivy League, phenomenal, and them fire I was in Austin last week. Barry Weiss and Neil Ferguson were opening up that University of Austin. And Neil,
are they opening up a university?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Barry Weiss.
No,
wow.
Barry's fantastic.
Wow, they're opening it up. I love this.
And I
love Austin.
Yeah.
Fuck, I was just there.
Dude, it was great. And what they're doing
so
in Joe Lonsdale. And I got to meet some of the kids that are going to be part of their first class. And like, these are impressive kids and kids that have the balls to say, something, it's more of a secure career path. These are kids who are getting into Ivy League.
Yeah.
And they said, something, I think this is all an illusion now, this Ivy League. I'm going to take this path instead. Big balls on these kids. And so Neil Ferguson was speaking. He goes, I know that everyone thinks it was a big win that they pressured Harvard into firing Claudine Gay. Let me read you some of the headlines from the Harvard Crimson since she's been fired. And he just rattles off 12 headlines. They're just most insane woke bullshit you've ever heard in your life. And so we're winning. There's a few battles of the counter-revolution that are being won, but it is 10 times, the battle's going to be 10 times as hard to win as it would have been had we done this in 2018. And we have a long ways to go, but you got to build on optimism.
Yeah, I wonder if a lot of these kids are going to get jobs. Like this is very interesting with after October 7th, when the Harvard student, this student group said we hold Israel 100% responsible. Mm-hmm. And then you just had a whole bunch of people, the real money, go, fuck this, like Bill Ackman, who already was dealing with his daughter who had road crew and was at Harvard and was freaking out over capitalism at the table. It's like, I know, darling, your life is tough. I appreciate that you really care. I get it. She's young, and but he was like, what the fuck is going on here? That you don't even know how capitalism works. What are you doing now? Yeah, obviously she grew up fabulously wealthy, and it comes with a lot of baggage, but I think that it'll be interesting to see what happens when these very smart people who are 40 and older start to kind of really push back. There's money to be made in the pushback, certainly in this in social media, right?
Definitely.
Douglas Murray has no problem getting speaking engagements,
sure.
etc.
Or listen, Barry Weiss, what Barry has built, which is incredibly impressive, because even before she had built it, even back when I started being a little more robust with content, I spoke with an agent. He says, yeah, man, you have great stuff, and there's a big appetite for what you're putting out there as kind of like a not that easily identifiable left or right person, but there's just no network or institution for you, right?
Yeah.
For that, and there's a big underserved appetite for that. And Barry's the first person that I'm seeing that's building something at the institutional level of like, here's an intellectual outlet for news and thoughts and ideas that you can't just readily identify as one direction or the other.
Well, it's probably just about being responsive to the evidence. It's about the truth.
You'd hope, right?
Right. So that doesn't mean you don't take. Where do you take the quote unquote right to task? What do you think?
They're too lazy about some of the conspiracy stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Listen. There's you've got shrewd skepticism, and then you've got lazy conspiracy. So this is the best case study I can give. Okay. Epstein killing himself. Right off the bat, on the surface, that one smells. Then you start looking into it. Oh, these cameras weren't working. Oh, the security guards weren't around that night. The second layer of analysis also supports this being something sinister. Okay. You ever heard of a guy named Steve Bing? Mm-mm. Steve Bing was a trust fund kid, as an heir to some family fortune, grew up in LA, started, he was probably, he was born in the 70s, dated, a bunch of actresses in the 90s, produced a bunch of movies. I remember being a teenager and reading about him in, Entertainment Weekly or whatever, like, man, dude, this guy, his claim to fame was he impregnated Elizabeth Hurley during her prime. Like, man, dude, this guy got all this money, dating these actresses, living so well. And most of those types of guys people speak poorly about, but he was spoken about well. I'm like, man, dude, that guy's got the life, man. Steve Bing jumped off a 42nd story building and killed himself in, I think it was 2021 or 2020 or 2021. Okay. He was very in with the Clintons. He'd been to Epstein Island. Okay. And if you just on the surface wanted to construct some theory that whatever the cover up was about whatever Clintons are doing, something having to do with Epstein, do you know how easy it would be for me to go put together a Twitter thread or an Instagram story sequence that makes that look super sinister? Then I happen to know people. I was supposed to meet Bing. A couple guys I know that were movie producers in the 90s were friends with him. Right before the pandemic, we were supposed to all go to something that they were doing, and but I never knew Bing. I knew a lot of people who did, including a bunch of women that he was still trying to sleep with when he was past his prime. Okay, every one of them was like, "Yeah, dude, that guy. He got weird, lonely, and I think he was hurting. And even the last Thanksgiving, he didn't have anyone to spend it with. He tried to spend it with me and my family. Steve Bing killed himself.
Yeah, he killed
himself. Right. So
people kill themselves.
Exactly. So what you look at the way it's easy to connect dots. But you can't just think that you're so brilliant because, you saw the couple dots that we're connecting. It makes it look like the surface story is false and there's something, an ulterior motive or some other explanation. You have to go to the second layer of analysis, right? And so I think the Taylor Swift thing, God, people,
I know,
unbelievable. Yeah. Taylor Swift is fabricating this entire relationship to increase her net worth by 0.2%.
Yeah.
Like, stop it.
Yeah, and the Kansas City Chiefs there was that they threw the game because like, what are you talking about?
Come on,
Shut
you're
up.
like you're not like
that's adorable.
or
that's
like
an adorable
oh my
conspiracy.
God, this is an unnatural degree to which the media is focusing on the most famous woman in the world dating a professional athlete.
Yeah.
Like, the
it's
tabloids
the American pastime.
Exactly.
Hot blonde cheerleader with football star. They're both gorgeous.
Yeah, like, so that
traditional.
And then the Tucker thing with Russia and Putin, it was like, Tucker, it would have been so easy for you to just occupy the space of Vladimir Putin is not the arch supervillain that the establishment is making him out to be. He's also not the aggrieved defender of Christian values that some people are. There's something in between.
I think that Putin's appeal is very interesting. Is he's a stark. There's a predictable. He's a prototype. He's an archetype. He's the white Christian warrior who believes in masculine roles and feminine roles. It's there. He harkens back to a simpler time for a lot of people.
For sure, I get it.
That's
but
this idea.
Okay, but look. Tucker walked right. He stepped on a rake. He walked right into it. Because listen, not that I think that there was even this was by design, but you're out there slurping Putin and Putin's Russia. And I'm like, okay, I get it that there's some nice stuff in Moscow. Go out to some of the secondary cities, Tucker. Tell us what the quality of life is out there.
Talk to a guy about how optimistic he is about his kid's future when his kid's gonna work in a fucking factory all the way over there.
See what the plumbing's like in the second tier cities in Russia. And it's like, dude, if you could have been skeptical and established a position that was contrary to what the establishment is trying to push about Vladimir Putin trying to reconquer Eastern Europe, but not, kissed his ass. Yeah. And they took it too far. And that's where the right is with some of their skepticism now, that the right culturally was dominant for the entirety of the 20th century and is now culturally just whatever the opposite of dominant is. They're getting too paranoid. So it's like shrewd skepticism, yes.
Well, it goes back to what you're saying, overestimating your enemy's capability.
Correct. What Vance said, it was like, dude, meet these people. Okay, go meet Alex Soros. If you want all the conspiracy theories about George Soros, go meet his son who's been running the show for the past 10 years. This guy can't make a tuna sandwich.
That's exactly
okay.
Yeah.
Like this guy ain't no superhuman genius. He's just a dumb, guilt-ridden rich kid who doesn't realize that all
Gavin
the New York
Newsom is not a rocket science.
No, these guys are idiots.
Yeah.
It's like he's a political genius. He got shredded by DeSantis, and even a bunch of liberals I know are like, dude, DeSantis worked him in that debate. Like Gavin Newsom ain't that talented.
Yeah. Well, what about? Do you think there's anything to the Epstein list and who was on that island? Here's how I look at it. This is as conspiratorial as I get with Epstein. My guess is that Epstein was probably, first of all, he had an island. Powerful men want to have sex with hot, young women who are probably between the ages of 19 and 30 who are professionals. If you have lots of money and you're married or whatever, and you can go to an island and bang, guess what? That shit happens. And it was before Me Too.
Yeah.
So everybody was like, what? You got a fucking private jet? You got an island with these girls you bring in from Miami or wherever. It wasn't a bunch of little children running around. These guys were like, I want to have sex with that curvy chick that you showed me a picture of. That's what was going on.
Yes.
Right? So if you told me then that Epstein was working for Mossad or some intelligence agency, and they came to him and said, listen, we'll give you a shitload of money. Just let us rig this and have some cameras up so that we can use these videos as blackmail leverage. I mean, that's not far-fetched. You have influential people on your plane. Let's just we need some we need some leverage.
Sure.
We might need it someday. I can see that happening.
I think that's plausible. I think I mean, I don't know what the exact target is, but I know that you're a lot closer to the target than the people who think that this is. No, well,
I think he definitely was into young girls. I think that the problem with Epstein was he was into, apparently, he was bringing, 14 and 15-year-old girls over.
Because as you said, these guys, it's not even that newsworthy for these guys to be sleeping with a bunch of women that are 18, 19,
or 17, and they tell you they're 21.
Exactly.
They're not thinking that.
Yeah, it's just Epstein was these guys on steroids, and he also lived with so few restrictions. And he had Ghislaine, and Ghislaine. Everyone goes, "Oh well, Ghislaine Maxwell got prosecuted for sex trafficking women to no one." No, she got prosecuted for sex trafficking women to Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah. Okay, because Ghislaine was a rich kid, was a trust fund baby who apparently her family lost all her money, and Epstein was her meal ticket. And after he got tired of banging her, it was like, okay, well, if you want to stay in with this Epstein world and stay on the plane and on the island, you gotta satisfy Jeffrey. And this guy's a pervert. Did you know how many fucking massages this guy got a day? No. Jeffrey Epstein got like 17 massages a week because that was their game. Ghislaine would go approach the girls and say, Jeffrey wants a massage, and they'd go give him a massage, and then he'd whip it out, and then he'd take it from there. That was their Epstein was getting like massage after massage. It was insane. But that was their little game that they played.
So she was probably ultimately in love with the guy, and he was
either in love with him or I don't know. If you grew up around these trust fund kids, but once they if they have that lifestyle growing up and the prospect of losing it is in front of them, their morals will go I didn't know that she lost her money. Her father. Her family
was killed, right?
Yes, I wish I could recall more of the story with the father, but she had financial struggles, and the lifestyle that she lived growing up, she was not going to be able to live without a benefactor, and Epstein was the one. And I mean, was she in love with him, or was she just in it for the dough? Difficult to tell.
Yeah,
but
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, doesn't matter.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. So the powerful people that were on that island, I guess either paid the women off or whatever. Some of them were there just to talk about whatever the fuck.
Yeah,
it wasn't all a fuck fest.
Exactly. It was like Bill Gates, Jeffrey Epstein was he didn't, he was getting 15 massages a week, but I mean, there's 24 hours in a day. He was trying to fund A, B, C, D, E, or F, or G, right? They might have been there to discuss whatever he was in, whatever business stuff he was involved in.
Yeah. I agree. I do think that the conspiracy stuff is lazy.
Here's the thing.
It's coming from people that don't know a lot about how the government actually works too.
Yeah, well, the problem is people are taking when it's true and then applying and just saying, okay, now I'm going to apply that framework to every situation. It's like, no, you got to analyze each situation.
But what about the fact that it looks like the CIA was using other intelligence agencies to spy on 28 Trump associates? Is this
the intelligence apparatus went and Russia? One of the places where the conspiracy was true was the intelligence apparatus's campaign against Donald Trump and Russiagate. The accusations that there was a concerted effort to fabricate an entire story around Donald Trump with completely fabricated evidence that they knew to be incorrect and false at the time. That is correct. Because when you look at the evidence, if you look at the evidence supporting that assertion, it holds up, right? There's other situations where it doesn't hold up. And also the motive was there. Right, the motives were there. Donald Trump was speaking aggressively against the security state and these agencies, and they took action against him and his other political enemies. So sometimes people only look at the motive and then fill everything in after that. Right. You have to both establish the motive and then subject the motive and the facts to scrutiny, and that's where people get lazy.
That's interesting. That's a really interesting. That's a good distinction. Yeah. But was the law broken? I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, he was right about this.
Yes.
The idea that you can't. I'm appalled that the CIA was using other agencies and even spying on American citizens. That's the FBI's job, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, yes. But once again, I mean, listen,
it was a gray area though because they were dealing with Russians.
But it's always a gray area, right?
Yeah.
Because the term spying versus conducting justifiable surveillance, that's eye of the beholder. It's also dependent on the evidence. Do you get a search warrant? Same thing as a search warrant. Was there the factual basis to justify the search warrant? In the case of the Russians, and sometimes there is, right? Here there wasn't. Right? They fabricated some of the evidence. They mischaracterized the sources of the evidence, which was the whole thing with the Steele dossier and all of that. And also, the people who are trying to secure FISA warrants and other, legitimate forms of surveillance, it's up to you to subject your evidence to scrutiny in your sources. And when you know that Christopher Steele and the Steele dossier was originally oppositional research for the Hillary Clinton campaign, you are supposed to be more skeptical of that. It's up to you. If things are operating properly, you are being more skeptical of that, right? Just like when a prosecutor, if you're aware of evidence exonerating a criminal defendant, you're supposed to acknowledge that evidence, right? You're not supposed to hide it just because your ultimate goal is a prosecution, right? Mm-hmm. So this is where that process and the entire campaign by the security state against Donald Trump went wrong. And, there's a ton of those accusations are crux. So that's why I'm actually I take it a little easier on some of the conspiracy theorists, because some of the bigger conspiracies were true.
That's right. I was going to say. But you lose your credibility. You lose your credibility. See this, you're like, wait a minute. I don't blame people for going, I don't trust a fucking thing that comes out of their mouth.
Yep. Yeah. When oh my God, the letters signed by 51 members of the FBI and the CIA. There was the Russian collusion.
That's right. Russian collusion and the Hunter Biden laptop are the reason that a lot of people, like my friend Sam Tripoli and stuff, who are like, I don't fucking buy it, dude. I'm not buying it. You lost my trust. And they've earned that. I get it.
Sure.
I get that.
I'll cut them a little slack there. Because I want them to stop putting their foot in their mouth on occasion or stepping on rakes like Tucker did with Putin and this Russia stuff. Just go one layer deeper and say, wait a second. I see that there's some motive, that there's an aligned incentive between some bad actors here, but is the motive truly there? And is there another way to accomplish this?
This is right. My thing is that when you have Bobby Kennedy or Robert Kennedy talking about how BlackRock owns everything in the world, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what BlackRock does. It's not true. BlackRock doesn't do that.
Correct.
They don't own all that stuff. He literally is so lazy, he can't do the research as to what BlackRock is actually doing, what their business model is, what they don't own. Anyway, without going into that.
No, I think that's an interesting topic.
Yeah, because what you're doing is you're placing all your energy and you're finding this bad guy.
Yeah.
The bad guy ain't over there.
Yeah.
You can have your problems with Larry Fink and BlackRock or big corporations. That's a different thing. But that's not, they don't own all the land in Ukraine. That's a ridiculous
thing. And the stuff that they do own, they're not the only owner. If they own 15%, there's another hedge fund that owns 11.
Yes, and also they are, right. So they are somebody that if you want to invest in the S&P 500, for example, they will provide you with you can invest in those stocks. Mm-hmm. So people own those stocks. I can have a BlackRock account and I can own a piece of the American stock market. I'm the one that owns that though. Mm-hmm. They have a catalog for everything I want. But the idea that they have this insane influence to control everything and they own all this stuff you're looking at the wrong bad guy. If you want to fight, you've got to know who to punch. And that's where you've got to do your research. You've got to understand that you're not doing anything over there. You're not doing anything for your cause when you go after that.
Because they tie that a lot to the ESG stuff and DEI, but ESG is more the kind of more corporate version of that.
Explain equity.
Okay, so diversity, equity, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, ESG, environmental, social, and governance.
Right.
And so it's both. Okay, this is interesting parallel. Diversity, equity, inclusion started off with the most legitimate one. Diversity, lowercase d. No. Hey, that's nothing that wrong with just diversity. Hey, let's go make sure that we don't.
Business, maybe.
Let's make sure we don't have a blind spot that's stopping us from recognizing the talents of certain groups of people.
Yes.
By all means, equity and inclusion. Go fuck yourself. Right? Environmental, social governance originally started as just an environmental measurement. Right? Because you should be looking at companies that do have some impact on the environment and making sure that they're not contaminating the water or the air, having too much of an impact on the environment.
Tuna nets versus tuna lines.
Yeah, or just, toxic waste.
Sweatshops and all
exactly. And one of the few things that the government did that if I am going to give the government credit for, where we are right now, the air in California used to be really bad.
Fuck yeah.
And then they put
25 years, I can tell you, 28 years.
It's got better.
Way better.
Absolutely. So environmental. Sure, social and governance, then you start getting into every little stupid left-wing progressive cause and the measurement of whether or not, that's why you have Philip Morris and Exxon rating higher on ESG scores than Tesla. And it's like, which company has more of a negative or positive impact on society? What do you think? But because Exxon decided to have Transgender Celebration Day or indigenous people or did an indigenous land acknowledgement before some fucking board meeting, I'm not kidding. There's stuff like this. Their ESG score is higher. And they've outsourced these scores to these weird all of them are progressive. They're all run by former, whether it's members of either the Clinton administration or Obama administration, et cetera. They're all these quasi-governmental organizations that get to determine the ESG scores. They have no idea what the calculation criteria is. All you know is that you can get a higher score by kissing progressive ass.
Yeah,
that's
right.
it.
That's right.
And then you've got a guy like Larry Fink, who's already rich. He's just trying to get claps and applauses at conferences he goes to. Okay, that's what great. If I go gas up ESG and talk about how much we care about ESG, the people at this conference are going to clap for me. Nerd. Do you think he actually cares?
No, he's just a nerd. He just wants to be loved.
Exactly. But until there's consequence to him pushing ESG, he'll push it. But the problem is people think he's pushing it because there's some sinister plot by Larry Fink and the WEF to get you to start eating bugs. No, he's just a rich guy whose entire life is going to conferences and dinners and things of that nature, and he wants to be popular. That's it.
I think that's such a fucking great way to put it. Don't underestimate how, and by the way, he also might be a guy who has a lot of money. The world's been good to him and he wants to make a difference.
Sure.
It might be that he's guilty. He might be like, fucking, we gotta make the world more equitable. I'm looking around at all I see is white people. We gotta make something different. Yeah. I get it. Like maybe he's just that guy. Whatever the case, do-gooders, beware, because you're gonna fuck things up.
And that's what happened. Because, like I said, there was a kernel of legitimacy to both DEI and ESG. Yeah. Let's make sure that we're not fucking up the environment, and let's make sure that we're not just being too dismissive of certain groups of people who are not looking for talent in certain demographics. By all means, those are fine. These ESG, DEI, uppercase bureaucratized versions of these things, horrendous, right? Yeah. And a guy like Larry Fink, he's fucking doing she's not paying enough attention to realize, right, how bad these things are. But the real problem are the people who are 7 years into a career, but it was like Bud Light, right? You've got about a 32-year-old marketing executive who's like, something, we need to tell all our customers that they're stupid Neanderthals that aren't supportive enough of transgender rights and they're knuckle-dragging frat boys. And she goes and does this marketing campaign, and finally there's some consequence to it. The fucking CEO didn't even know it was happening, okay? That's how these things work.
That's right.
Right. So until there's when there's consequences, people then start paying attention and waking up. Yeah. But it's like if we're pushing, we got the ball on our own 1 yard line, and we've got it out of maybe our own red zone, and maybe we're at our own 23 yard line now. So got a lot of way to go.
the most of the DEI officers in Hollywood in the studios have been quietly fired.
Yeah, a bunch of them.
It's like,
do you know how much money they're making? Like $600,000 a year. What?
Ibram Kendi, who wrote that terrible book, How to Be an Anti-Racist.
Oh, he's horrendous.
I read all of it. I read that book. I read Anti-Fragile, or no, not Anti-Fragile. I read
White Fragility.
White Fragility by that
you
terrible
fucking patronizing. Who the fuck do you think you are?
D'Angelo, whatever her name is.
Yeah.
She's such a lightweight. These people are lightweights. Ibram Kendi he's such a fraud. He makes so much money telling corporations how to be less racist, but this fucking fraud doesn't have the balls to debate anybody.
Nobody.
He's terrified.
Oh yeah, he can't.
Terrified. At least another guy, Ta-Nehisi Coates, who I read everything he ever wrote.
He's a smarter guy than
at least he gets in there and try. Yeah, of course he is. I don't agree with him, but at least Ta-Nehisi Coates gets in there and argues a little bit. Like he's willing to talk to John McWhorter and people like that.
Sure.
But they're not confident guys. They can't. Their ideas can't stand scrutiny.
But it's just the era that we're out of the era, but we're still going to be dealing with the effects as I've described. Like we're in the counter revolution, but hey, it's a long one. The fact that these people were able to rise to the top, get cultural respect. I mean, it just boggles the mind. Yeah. But then you start to see it, if you want to tie it back historically, to see how the bad ideas of demonizing order and civilization and just going off this toxic compassion where anyone who's being critical enough about the current order can be seen as the smart, shrewd observer. I mean, this has not gone well over the course of history. That's what gave rise to the Russian Revolution, the Cuban Revolution. That's right. I was speaking about it with your producers, like the Iranian Revolution, because I grew up with so many kids that were the victims of that, who had left, and it was The revolutionaries, everyone thinks the revolutionaries are the good guys right off the bat. Every one of those, everyone thought Castro was a good guy for a few years. Everyone thought the Ayatollah.
Well, revolutionaries are very good at tearing things down. They're not so good at building things back up.
Yeah, because the second they get any power, they operate by the principles of human nature and behavior and then abuse that power, just like everybody.
Well, every revolution eats its young. It just becomes a snake eating its own tail.
Totally.
It's like one of the things that Genghis Khan, when he would bring... They would go in and kill everybody and, rape and steal and all that. They were great guys. Fucking, the worst of the worst. And
it's Genghis Khan. What else are you
It's Genghis Khan. The Mongols would roll in and do these terrible things. And one of the problems that he ran into is very interesting, was that he would have the young boys trail behind and watch so that they learned the techniques of war and stuff. But these young boys are 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and they're watching their uncles and their brothers and their fathers rape women and cut the throats of children and do all these things. And then take whatever they want, and they're hearing screams and cries, and they'd tie people up, whatever they would do. And they just create a wasteland. The problem is these kids would come back to the camps, and they'd start doing it to their women and their people, and they would start taking things. And Genghis Khan realized he was raising an entire generation that had zero bedrock to more into. It didn't work to say to them, yeah, we're allowed to do it, but you can't do it to them.
Yeah.
You can't do it to us, but you can do it to them. That us versus them actually broke down. For kids, they were like, why?
Yeah.
What's the difference between us and them? Well, we're Mongols. I know, but what does that mean? I can't sink my teeth into that. So the children... He realized he couldn't, he had to actually instill a sense of morality. He had to figure out a way to, if he was going to keep a cohesion to his society, it couldn't just be because we're more powerful.
Yeah.
Because I'm stronger and I say so. You need a philosophy.
Moral decay does not stay localized. It spreads.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't be a savage in one aspect of your life and then
fair play. Fair play and a moral sense seems to be something that's as inherent in us as is the opposite side. We are competitive, aggressive apes. We're also creative and kind apes. We also have the other side to us.
Yeah. Well, the capacity for good or evil, I mean, isn't why there's, so many theologies and religious texts. I mean, they're phrased differently, but there's so much convergence in terms of the principles you're supposed to live by, a sense of good and evil, and, mankind having the capacity for both. I mean, not that I'm not a not religious person, but I'm not a religious person. Yeah. But, you go look at there's so many commonalities.
Well, when human beings make up their own gods, good luck. What's up? Hey, Chris.
What's going on, man?
Yeah. So this is an intellectual conversation.
Yeah.
And so what I'll do is I'll send you the comic book version, okay? I'll draw... Oh, Jesus. Matt Bilinsky.
Oh, good.
Matt Bilinsky. That'd be Chris Lee, and that's Brendan Schaub.
Nice to meet you
And
guys.
hey, guys, this is look at how I'm sitting. This is an intellectual conversation. Yeah. Well, there are books behind here.
No, it's the light bulbs. Yeah. It's
And the light bulbs.
Very Edison.
I think it's that
Yeah.
actual drawing of Abe Lincoln.
Yeah, Samurai Lincoln.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
we.
Having an intellectual conversation, you're still wearing a hoodie.
All right, dude, but the set is
Ran
still
into
a work in
Zuckerberg the other
progress.
day, dude. That's it. Zuckerberg wrote
You guys
off
might
on
want to hang out and play with us a little bit after this.
Absolutely.
Sorry about that
No worries.
that interruption of my dear friends. Yeah, man, but do you can I ask you, because you probably follow these things more closely than
Sure.
I do. What is actually going on? What in the fuck is actually going on with the border? And how much does Biden bear? How much does the Biden administration bear some responsibility? Because I remember during the Democratic debate, they said, "How many of you favor decriminalizing the border?" And every Democratic candidate raised their hands.
Yeah. Okay, so the easy to answer question is Biden carries maybe not 100% of the blame, but an overwhelming share of the blame.
Why?
He absolutely does. I'll explain to that until what the hard question is. The difficult to answer question is, why are they allowing this to happen? And I'll tell you how difficult the question this is to answer. Are you familiar with Bill Malugin?
No.
Bill Malugin was one of the best local reporters in LA. He was working for the local Fox affiliate. So good, Fox News decided to pluck him, I think, in 2021, and were like, "You're doing great work." Bill has been the guy at the border down there. He's been to the border probably 40 out of 52 weeks every year for the past 3 years, right? He's covering this border crisis. If there might be a couple independent journalists that are all maybe approaching the level of that he has covered this on, nobody's covering it more than him.
Let's get him on the podcast.
He's the prop. Fox isn't letting him do stuff. I mean, you can give it a shot. I tried to have him on.
Fox doesn't let him on?
After, I won't get into why, but
Okay.
Fox has some hesitation to let their reporters do. I'll put you in touch with him without a doubt. And he's phenomenal. Okay. I asked Bill, Bill doesn't know. And Bill's super smart, literally staring this in the face, interviewing the refugees, the border agents, everything daily. And even he doesn't have a firm conclusion on it.
On why they're able to come over the border, why
also
they are
why-
coming over the border? They're coming over the border because their countries are a disaster.
I'm sure. Hey, some people with bad lives wanting to look for a better life. Yeah,
That's easy.
Yeah, easy. That's 90% of it, and then there's 10% that have that plus some other sinister motive in terms of human trafficking, fentanyl, or maybe some even more sinister stuff. There arose in 2008, Barack Obama expresses an extremely sensible view on illegal immigration. He says, listen, we want to be inviting to immigrants, but you have to have an orderly process. It has to operate by the order of the law, and not everybody can come. You need to establish some border integrity. That just goes out the window in response to Donald Trump. And it becomes an article of faith amongst any liberal commentator, politician, representative, whatnot, that America essentially, that having any sense of a border and not allowing people to come in here at their will or at least seek asylum, and we'll get to the distortion of that term in a second, means that you are a white honky cracker racist piece of garbage, right? And that becomes kind of woven into the cultural fabric of left-wing thought in response to Donald Trump. And then you hear Democratic candidates for president say things that are flagrantly insane, like we cannot stop these people, we cannot deport these people or stop them from coming over. Barack Obama 2008 would not have said anything even close to that. And then, Biden gets into office, overturns, Donald Trump did only a fraction of what he promised to do in securing the border, but he did more than these guys. Whatever he did do, Biden overturns. He essentially signals to all these immigrants and asylum seekers, so-called asylum seekers, hey, you should be coming here because we're going to be more inviting. All of a sudden, what a shocker! Record number of migrants start trying, and asylum seekers, quote unquote, start trying to come through the southern border, and they start overwhelming the cities along the border in Texas. And the whole notion of asylum is that you're being persecuted. It doesn't just mean that your life sucks.
Right.
It just doesn't mean that you're
Right.
low income, right?
Right.
Or that the country that you come from is low income, has low opportunity, and is more dangerous than Philadelphia, right? That's not the definition of asylum. Also, the generally accepted international rules of asylum seeking is you seek asylum in the nearest country available to you, not America. Just because every asylum seeker out there who might be persecuted doesn't get to come to the country of their preference. They get to go seek asylum in the nearest country that is safe for them. That all goes out the window, and it's a completely reckless, irresponsible administration of the border by Joe Biden, and he keeps on not fixing it, right? And you see
How would one fix it?
just do what you were doing 3 years before.
Don't let people over the border.
Well, no, just enforce a more traditional standard definition of asylum in assessing whether or not someone is a valid asylum seeker. One, and two, do not just give them a notice to appear 2 years for their
Send
asylum
them
here.
over the border.
Exactly. Or what? Look, the Texas National Guard was putting up barbed wire to create a physical barrier, and the federal border agents went and started cutting the barbed wire. Don't cut the barbed wire. That's another way to prevent it, right? We didn't have this degree, this volume of migrants coming through the southern border ever in our history. So hey, go do whatever the hell we were doing when this volume was not coming through the southern border. Beyond
So
that,
do you think that the progressives want these people over the border?
So then this is another one where it's easy to take the low-hanging fruit conspiracy, but then you start trying to analyze it deeper. The low-hanging fruit explanation is these are people more likely to vote for Democrats, and they want these immigrants in the country to become Democratic voters. And I don't dismiss that. That could be it. But even Bill wasn't sure about that. Because if you're letting people in the country who barely speak English and you want them to fill out a ballot and vote for you, you have to then monitor them. Look what's happening though. You're letting them into Texas, where the Texas Republican governor then has kind of control over them and is shipping them on buses to liberal states, right? Where you're going to win the elections anyways. So if you need them to fill out a ballot, you need to monitor them and keep some degree of control over them. But if you're just releasing them into the country, how do you get them the fucking ballot? How do you control who they vote for? That's a tough one, right?
Right.
Bill, I want to be respectful of what he told me. Not that I think it's that confidential, but he was not firm in the belief that that's why they're doing it. I won't get into what he thought was more likely.
Yeah, that seems a little bit, again, that's a little too forward thinking for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, it's just like,
and really, who knows at the end of the day? But I sadly want to say, gentlemen, we've got to wrap up this podcast because Eric Weinstein is sitting outside.
Aha.
And
my guy, Eric Weinstein.
I know, and it's been.
Oh, now it's a real party.
I didn't know whether you were on air.
Oh, look what we got jamming, Eric.
You guys know each other?
Yeah, of course. What's going on?
brother.
Pretty good. Good to see
We're
you.
wrapping this up right now. I'm so glad you stopped. It's like he stopped.
Are you on?
I mean, this is amazing.
Yeah, but so what? We're just, but this is, I want you to see.
How you
here to
doing?
see this. All right, this is great. Hey, you're so sneaky. All right.
We went from D'Elia to Weinstein.
Yeah.
God,
I mean,
we're
we got a lot
covering-
of celebrities up in this
Absolutely.
bitch.
Covered
Eric
all
Weinstein
360
walks
degrees.
in, and it was kind of exciting. So he's here, and he's here for a tour. Eric, you're in a polo shirt with a mug of coffee, and you're all
on the coldest
done
day
up.
in Southern California, and God
all-
knows when.
I come from the 20th century. Good tidings.
I come from the 20th century. Listen, this has been awesome. I'm going to wrap this up,
For sure.
and I appreciate you.
Appreciate
Matt,
you,
it
Brian.
was great. We got to do this more often, man.
doubt.
It's so much
No
fun.
doubt. Yeah.
And I'm gonna bring Eric Weinstein into the mix eventually on this podcast.
The Oracle himself.
the
Just
Oracle himself.
Every time I see Eric, I run into Eric anywhere out. Somehow naturally, like an amoeba or something, naturally forms like a listening circle around him to listen to him. Yeah, people start peppering with
Well,
questions.
when I have people in town, they I swear to God, like I'll have like whether it's Evan Hafer, the CEO of Black Rifle, they're always like. And I've talked to Eric. Somehow he'll call me and they're like, "Do you think I could meet him?" Everybody wants to have dinner with Eric, and
Hell of a dinner guest.
I always look like a real superstar, but he never makes it. It's always like, "Where are you?" And then it'll be like 10 at night. He's like, "Are you guys still there?" I'm like, "The fuck, dude!" But then we wait for him. So
he's figuring out, but he's doing Goodwill Hunting stuff.
yeah, he's got the biggest brain I've ever seen.
It's up there.
Yeah, he's an original thinker.
Look what he walked into, just an Eric Weinstein celebration.
I know I don't like being around Eric a lot of times because I'm reminded that everything I say is something I'm parroting or that I have read, and Eric seems to put things together in an original way.
No doubt,
So
no
I always
doubt.
learn. That was our little homage to Eric Weinstein, who's standing over there in the corner, shuffling back
Very
and forth.
indescript with his cappuccino.
You look like a schoolboy. He's just holding he's warming his hands, his rather large hands, on his mug. All right. Matt Bilinsky, you're a good man.
Thank you, sir. This is
I
awesome.
couldn't find anything I disagreed with you on.
Yeah,
You're painfully sensible.
I'm doing my best, standing on the shoulders of giants like Eric in terms of rationale and sensibility. And maybe we'll find something we're disagreeing on one of these days, or maybe we'll just be, foot soldiers in the counter revolution, aiming in the same direction.
You remind me, you're a better looking of me when I was your age.
I'll take
because
it.
you've got blue eyes and
Something like that.
So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you learned everything here. This has been Off Limits.